Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective. I'm your host, Brian Perez, and here we are till 4 o'clock to answer the questions you have about the Bible, the Christian faith, just about anything on your mind. You can call in and talk to us at 888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. If you're watching us online on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and share, too. Let other people know what we're doing here, and then that way they can call in with their questions as well. 888-564-6173 is our number, and you can also send in your questions on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger or by DMing us on the Pastor's Perspective Instagram, or go to our website, kwave.com. Look for the Pastor's Perspective page, fill out the form there. Fill out the form there. That gets your question to us too. But the best way to get an answer is to call 888-564-6173. Author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, is here. He's joining me online. How you doing, Bobby?
Good. Great to be with you guys. Looking forward to the show.
Yes, and as you can see, Bobby, we have a guest. Who are you, sir? Tell us.
Well, my name is Matthew Hall. You can call me Matt, and I am so glad to be here. I get the privilege of serving at Biola University right here in Southern California.
Yay!
And, really,
one of the most comprehensively Christian university in North America, by the way.
We would like to say the
yes,
most, but we'll leave that for another time. But so glad to be with you.
Very cool. So what's your title there at Biola? What do you do?
I serve as the university's provost, which begs another question, like what in the world is that?
In fact, let's go to Fred on line 3. What's your question, Fred? Hi, what's a provost?
Yeah, and that's the question everyone's asking right now. They might want to pull over their cars. It's about to be so exciting. The provost of a university is the chief academic officer. So the person who oversees kind of all the academic programs, the curriculum, the degree programs, and the faculty and the personnel. So the academic stuff, the stuff that you would hope would matter in a Christian university.
So are you Ed Stetzer's boss, or is Ed
Technically,
your boss?
Yes, that is true. I am Ed Stetzer's boss, and so you can pray for me in that. It is a joy to get to be Ed Stetzer's boss, and we were literally on the phone talking about work on my way into the studio today. So it's fantastic.
Cool. Well, we'll have Ed here back, I think, next Wednesday or one of these Wednesdays. Usually on Wednesdays, we have a Biola University representative here to answer the questions that you guys have. And today it is Matt Hall. You can find out more about Biola, by the way, at biola.edu. But let's get to some questions that were sent in online before we go to the phones at 888-564-6173. And here's one that says, I have a son that was killed in an auto accident. The person that was with him at the scene was a passerby who ran over to try to help him, but my son died at the scene. This person was a female. I believe God made a way for me to meet her because she was someone I didn't know, and he provided the connection for this witness to come forth. This person was a gay woman, and I just loved her and shared Christ with her over the years. I was very grateful that my son was not alone when he took his last breath. And while I give all the glory to God for honoring my request, because it torments me that he would have been all alone, he brought her to my doorstep. I shared Christ with her, told her about God's love, and we prayed together. But then she was gone for a couple of years, reached out to me, shared with me that she was changing into a male. By the way, I'm going to read the rest of this here that was sent in on Facebook, and I'm just going to read it as it was sent in, so don't be getting all mad at me if you hear me switching pronouns and all that other stuff. So just wanted to make that disclaimer. So here's the last part. It says, it was very difficult for me, but I kept feeling in my heart that I couldn't treat this person differently. We still keep in touch, typically. Now he reaches out on my son's passing anniversary and on his birthday and sends me a very kind message. He has also shared about God and what God has done in his life. I don't feel it's my place to condemn him, but to continue to pray for him. In the Bible study, though, recently, my sisters judged me for that. They also are very supportive of Donald Trump and all the things he's doing. While I agree with some of it, I don't feel that this individual should lose any rights as a citizen of the United States of America. It's very complicated. Thank you for your time. So we've got a couple of issues here going on. But Bobby, how would you start off addressing this?
Well, I'd say a couple things. Number one, we wouldn't want to condemn the person. That's not our role as Christians. I do think that as it relates to our gender, there's a very small, portion of humanity that does struggle from true, dysphoria issues. It's been hyper exasperated by all the stuff that's going on through social media and through politics and just different types of education that people are receiving. So it's been a big thing where you've seen a massive increase where people are confused. But the person who genuinely from a young age has felt trapped in the wrong body, that is just a horrible thing to even imagine. It's just heartbreaking. And I would just invite people that want to throw stones to try to imagine what it would be like to look in the mirror and feel like, you are the opposite gender. Now, our feelings, they don't care about the facts, as it's been said. So we have to remember that God has created two genders, male and female. There is a particular condition known as intersex, where somebody has a male and female set of genitalia, and so then you can understand in a situation where somebody might make a decision there. I think as far as loving the person, yes. The pronoun, what to refer to somebody as, that's going to become a personal conscious thing. Some people are going to feel okay. Some people aren't. We can just respect the differences. And the last thing I would say as it relates to some of the legalities, it's a problem for me if you have people going through a sex change and then you have males having a sex change on government funds to become a female in prison, and then they're being put into a female prison, or if they're competing in women's sports. Those are some of the things that are difficult. So I do think that people need to be loved on, and we should have the right to share our thoughts. But there are some laws that I think undercut even women, and we need to be mindful of that.
Matt, any thoughts from you?
Well, I'm just really struck. You guys saved the easy questions for later, I hope. I mean, good night. You came out of the hour here with a strong one, and I was just struck actually, and so appreciated what Pastor Bobby just shared. I was struck by the way this woman's story began. That in her son's final moments, in God's wisdom, this was the person that He brought along to provide some comfort in those final moments. And you just hear her heart as a mom come through in her question. And I just want to at least acknowledge, like, God's glory is all over that, like a mom whose heart breaks and bleeds for her son who's now no longer with her. And so I think we can feel even the emotion in that question. And I just think that's a beautiful thing. That's God made us feeling creatures in His image, to have compassion, and you hear that in her heart. And just to echo what Bobby said, I think there's so much that we don't know in this situation, where there's so much needed wisdom to know how to navigate this, right? It's not always, okay, this is exactly how it should work. Well, you need biblical and godly wisdom. But what we do know to be true is exactly what Bobby already said, is that God made us male and female, like our gender and kind of modern gender theory, which is so confused and often so detached from biblical truth. What we know to be true is God made us male and female, that our biological sex is part of what it means to be made in His image, and that's a good gift. And so whatever's going on in this person's life that this woman has encountered, what we know is God made her a woman biologically in her sex. Whatever confusion she may be experiencing, whatever the reasons for that, even as Bobby alluded to some of the very complicated realities that can lead to that confusion that someone experiences, it sounds like 99.9% of the cases, so to speak, the reality is this is a biologically sexed person, and that is a good gift from the Lord. And how we then navigate that pastorally and relationally, boy, we need wisdom. We need that combination of grace and truth to have conviction, but to hold it in a kind way, in a patient way, in a long-suffering way, because we never know how God's going to turn hearts and when He's going to turn hearts. And we just got to be faithful and be obedient.
Yep. Bobby?
Yeah, that's so true. And that's a very pastoral answer right there. I do think that it hurts my heart when I hear that she has, I think you said maybe her sisters or people that she's close to.
Sisters at church.
Just being, adamantly against this. And I just think That's the stuff that just gives us such a bad reputation as a church. I don't know why we feel like just because we disagree with somebody, we can't be loving it. I mean, imagine this lady. I mean, she's dealing with a person who was with her son in his final breath. She feels probably a sense of obligation. I don't agree about, what going from a sex change and all this, but it's still a human being that she's dealing with. And so to kind of get that advice and where people get frustrated and angry, this is some of the reasons why we need to listen when we hear complaints from the LGBTQ community. I don't think we can compromise our beliefs. Like, we need to be able to have the higher love, which means that we can accept each other without agreeing with each other and not trying to force each other to agree. That's a low view of love if it's conditional love. Oh, I will accept you if you agree with me. The higher love is when we can accept each other, respect each other's different consciences in the matter. And I just think that that's a lesson for us all to hear, that if we have people that we come in contact with that are part of the LGBTQ community, let's not reinforce a narrative that many of them already believe, that we're just hateful. And so similarly, the frustration that I think we can feel is we can feel like, oh, well, unless we celebrate all things LGBTQ, then we don't really accept and love them. And that's just not true. And what happens is then we get put on the defensive. We're always having to argue not about facts, but about these things that get exaggerated. Oh, you're a bigot, you hate. And if we could just talk about maybe, well, why is it that you disagree? Well, I'm just trying to be faithful to what I see in the scriptures. I'm not trying to compromise. And there's things that God asks of me that, are difficult, and all of us that are difficult, but it's just not our job to sit as a magistrate over the scripture. And similarly, I think that we want the same respect as well. And we want to give that same respect. If somebody disagrees with us, or vice versa, I do think we should still show love. I think that's the way that we can operate. So there's a way that we can be compassionate without compromise.
Do you know, Bobby or Matt, has Donald Trump, has this administration taken away rights from transgender people? I'm not quite sure what this person meant by what they wrote on that, or maybe there's a fear of that happening. I don't know.
I think I can actually. My world's kind of higher education, and it actually, if issues like this have come up, it has had to do with transgender questions, and a lot of it has to do with athletics. Mm-hmm. So it's very limited. Let me just point that out. It's very limited. And I think what this administration has done through an executive order has been, honestly, try to bring some clarity. And I'm not making a political judgment here. I'm not making any kind of endorsement or anything like that, but trying to bring some clarity into what has been a very confused time for even the NCAA. So this could get a little wonky, but even the NCAA, which is not a Christian organization, there are Christians involved with it, there are non-Christians involved with it, but they've been in an almost impossible situation of being asked to determine, well, what do we do when a biological male wants to swim on the women's swimming team? Mm-hmm. And that's why you're hearing, even here in California, public officials who previously might have said one thing now say something a little different, recognizing that was an impossible tension. Mm-hmm. That even, you don't have to be a Christian to see that was unsustainable. And I think the administration tried to bring some clarity into that and saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so it's raised some anxiety, understandably, within the broader LGBTQ community. And I think, just to echo what Bobby said, and even in this context, what an opportunity for the people of God to bring clarity, loving truth, but to do so just that lovingly and say, hey, this is why we think this, and this is especially good for women. If we want to dignify and protect women, let's just say for a moment in intercollegiate athletics, for their own safety, for their flourishing, for their well-being as women made in God's image, it's not a good idea for biological women to be competing in intense NCAA sports with biological males who maybe identify as women. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably what's going on here. Pastor Bob, you may be aware of other situations, but that one I know is kind of out there, is these executive order regarding transgender issues in intercollegiate athletics and things like that.
Yeah, Bobby?
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. I mean, I think that what Trump did is, he ruffled some feathers, obviously, when he came down and said, hey, there's, two genders, male and female. And we're even seeing some of the stuff where in the UK, they're recognizing this. And so again, my heart goes out to people that are gender confused. But the problem with all of this is a language game that's going on. I mean, for example, if I just said right now that I'm a woman, I mean, we all know intuitively that's not true. But we're actually going along with this game, and gender is not something that's fluid. You go in and out. Our feelings are fluid about maybe our gender, and that can happen to people. I mean, I can't relate to what that would feel like, but that can be very fluid for some people. Like they feel like a man, they feel like a woman, they're not sure. And all we have to do is think about the number of pronouns. These pronouns are not rooted in facts. It's rooted in the subjective feelings of people, and they're coming up with new definitions to articulate their feelings. But it's not fact. Like I could come up, I could grab onto any one of these 100 plus pronouns and say something. But the problem that we have is you get in a situation where we're ruled by our emotions. Our emotions are our master. But what that does, the consequences to just the language in general, to understanding how to read and books and all that, it just creates so much chaos that I think about myself being colorblind. I know that there's objective color. To me, I don't see color properly. And I would never advocate that we start legislating all kinds of laws and do things because, I have a deficiency in this area. I recognize that I've got a deficiency, and I trust that others that are more objective when it comes to color, that they can help me. And this shakes out in my wife and kids helping me with my clothes at times, because I have went out the door looking absurd when I'm left to myself, and I felt like I was looking good. And I needed them to just be honest. And I have to realize that they hold the facts as it relates to color, and I don't. Even though I might feel like I'm looking good, it might feel okay to me, it might feel right. For me to demand that there's no such thing as objective red or objective blue because I see it as purple or I see it as green, that would just create so much chaos. And so I think that for people that genuinely struggle to be able to say, look, I realize this isn't the norm, and I can recognize there's two genders. What's happening is my feelings are in a bit of a conundrum, and I just need help navigating through this. And there's tons of compassion. Where it gets hard and frustrating is when people start expecting us all of a sudden to ditch the language of male and female that's been there throughout all history, throughout all cultures. And now all of a sudden we're this enlightened group that have been missing it all along, that there's not two genders. I can't help but think that we've been influenced by philosophy that is Rousseauian in its form. And I just think that we have to be really cautious in this department.
Very good. Now let's go to the phones here on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. We'll begin with Rose in Rancho Cucamonga. Hello, Rose. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How can we help you today?
Good. I'm glad. Thank you for taking my call. Well, like I was telling the nice lady, I don't want to get emotional. I don't want to cry. It's kind of hard for me, but, I just was hoping that you guys can give me some kind of encouragement or some advice on how, other than, obviously we have to pray and do our prayers and thank God for what we have and where we are and who we are. But right now, I'm just really struggling with just the state of the world, but our administration and what's going on right now. I never thought in my wildest dreams that we would be going through what we're going through. I'm just having a really hard time with it, and I know I'm not the only one, but I was just hoping that, I don't know, give me some kind of guidance to where, I don't have this frustration. And I told the lady, I don't like to use the word hate, because I don't hate anybody. I may hate what they do or what they stand for or something, but I try to look at both sides of everything. And I'm just really struggling with this right now, because I don't want that in my heart. And I'm just wondering if you guys could just give me and other people that might be struggling with what's going on right now a little bit of advice on how to deal with the anxiety and the frustration and,
Sure. Yeah, we might be able to help you with that, but I'm just a quick question for you, Rose, and this goes back to the conversation we were just having regarding the question that was sent in on Facebook. But sure, you may not like what this administration is doing, but were you okay with what the previous administration was doing? For example, when it came to allowing women to play in men's sports, allowing men to play in women's sports. Were you okay with that? I mean, I'm trying to figure out. So
no, I wasn't. I don't think that's fair. I think it just comes down. I think my frustration is just the way I'm big on. It's not what you say; it's how you say it. I get that there's got to be rules, regulations. It's just got to be for society, to be somewhat unified. But
okay.
I think it's just the way the hatred is getting stirred up and the negativity. And
so, Bobby, it's not what you say; it's how you say it. What do you think about that?
I do think it's important that we speak with the right tone. It is interesting. I mean, like with Trump, for example, obviously these tariffs, the immigration, DOGE, those are creating some frustration for sure with people. And anytime you're making these sweeping policy decisions, I think most people, by and large, the stats show that the immigration situation, people are feeling better about, safer about. But that doesn't mean that there's not some sad stories out there that we need to remember to have a compassionate tone. And even if somebody was here illegally, and I do think they should go through a proper process, it doesn't mean that we need to miss out on compassion. Just, this person's here illegally. Like, maybe we don't know the circumstances, and our hearts should still be compassionate about how hard it's going to be for this person to be uprooted from their loved ones. I think that with DOGE, there's certainly people that are getting axed from jobs, and that's causing pain. The tariffs, that's yet to be seen how that's going to turn out, but I think that's created some instability. But for me, what is interesting is, I feel a lot less anxious. So it goes to show, how messed up and split we are as a culture. Like, I feel 100 times better, even though I can recognize what I just said, compared to the Marxism, the DEI, the celebrating all things LGBTQ. I mean, it was just a mess having a president that I think it didn't even, that I wouldn't literally hire if I owned a McDonald's to be a cashier. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just saying I wouldn't hire him as a cashier and he was running our country. Mm-hmm. So I feel better, but that doesn't mean I'm all things Trump either. And I think that at the end of the day, our hope has to be in the Lord. And I think that regardless of who's president, we all have to learn how to realize who sits on his throne and to grow in that peace. And that can be hard. And I hear you in that. I'm an anxious person by nature, and it's easy for me to feel anxiety too. And we're all in these political silos. And man, I think the biggest thing we need to be praying about is for some kind of a future leader that can have the wisdom to pull us together as a country so that we're not all split off from each other. Because right now it doesn't feel like the United States. It feels like the divided states.
Matt Hall, the questions do get easier as the program goes. Have you noticed?
This is what a welcome to the studio. Thanks, guys. But I got, again,
Matt. Bring it.
Well, Rose, what a great, I think we hear your heart in that too, and even your emotion. And so I'd want to speak to it as an American and as a Christian, not necessarily in that order of priority, because my Christian identity is far more important than my American identity. But I'm really thankful for the blessing of living in this country. And I just want to say, as an American, I'm hopeful, whatever your political persuasion, whatever your opinion about decisions that any administration makes, and we all have our opinions, we've kind of been here before. Like, if you take the long view of American history since our founding, we've gone about every 50 years or so through some era of real turmoil, upheaval, and kind of political even realignment. And I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but think of like people like Andrew Jackson in the early republic, then the Civil War, and the country. I mean, there have been severely testing moments for the United States, but in many ways, the country and our kind of democracy and our political institutions come out stronger on the other side. It looks scary in the moment, and they look like they're fraying, but on the other side, we come out a stronger nation. And so that's not a theological analysis. It's just looking at, over 200 years of American history, thinking the American experiment is a remarkably resilient one. And our Constitution and those founding principles that our founders had, I think really are that enduring. And so I'm hopeful that whatever your opinion on these things are, that we're going to come through this as a nation with, as Bobby just alluded to, we pray for the right kind of leaders that would lead us to that kind of vision. And if you look at American history, I do think you find God in his mercy gave us leaders, both at the federal and state levels often, who led us through those seasons of turmoil and unrest to a greater sense of cohesiveness and solidarity as the American people. And I'm hoping and praying that God will do that. I will say then lastly, as a Christian, I'm always hopeful. Because the Christian story is even bigger and more sure because we have God's promises to us as his people. And I have a friend, we're having this conversation in the studio today with you listeners, just, not that far removed from Easter. I have a friend who likes to say that if you're a Christian, the worst thing that can happen to you has already happened to you. You were crucified with Christ. So that's the worst thing. So what's the worst thing that can happen in your life? It's not as bad as being crucified with Christ. But the good news is the best thing that could happen to you has already happened to you. You've been raised with Christ and seated with him in the heavenly places. So if you're a Christian, it just has God's given you his word and his spirit to just lift the burden of a lot of these daily stresses. So we don't have to walk around with the fear and the anxiety that many of our neighbors do, because we know this life's a breath. So even if the worst thing that happens tomorrow happens, it's actually not the end of the world. So I think there's just, for a lot of us, there's remarkable help in reminding ourselves daily of the gospel, of what we know to be true from his word. And I'll say, at least for me, I sometimes know, like, if I'm wearing thin and some of those anxieties and frustrations are showing up, I got to kind of do a little audit on, like, well, what's my intake?
Yes.
Am I listening more to the world than I am to God's word? Like, if I'm starving myself in the Bible and I'm not reading his word daily and having fellowship with God, but I'm really dialed in on what's going on in the news, well, then I'm out of whack. My diet's out of whack. It's like my spiritual nutrition's out of whack. And it's going to show up in my heart and in my emotions and my anxiety. So I don't know Rose in her situation, how she would assess that, but at least for me, that's been a helpful exercise to kind of go, wait a minute, what's my intake right here?
Yeah. Bobby, about 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, I think that last point was really good, Matt. I would say, maybe watching some less news, and let's just hope that some way our journalists can not always be looking for the most extreme stories, because that's what gets feed, but that's not where reality typically is. It's just where the journalists tend to feed us on extreme news. And so just remember, it's a lot more balanced than that overall, but it doesn't always feel that way if we get too much of this in our system.
Yeah. And extreme news on both sides. We're not saying one or the other, but both sides can be extreme on everything. So Rose, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. It's time for us to take a break, but we'll be back with more of your questions questions. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. We've got Dr. Bobby Conway here and our special guest, Matt Hall from Biola University. 888-564-6173 is our number. And to find out more about Biola, visit biola.edu. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call if you've got a question for our panel today, which includes Matt Hall. He's the provost of Biola University. What's a provost? Well, we answered that in the first half of the question, or first half of the program, and we archive all of our episodes so you can go back and listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or watch us on Facebook or YouTube. Author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, is here too. And Bobby, I think you had one more remark you wanted to make before we go back to the phones at 888-564-6173.
Yeah, I just, for anybody that might be listening and has influence in the world of journalism or people who even, do podcasts, I really do feel like we need some people who have strong leadership abilities that are leading these different news channels and big podcasts, and to rethink to understand the consequences of how we report, because it drives me crazy. If I go back and forth between, liberal and conservative media, they're just hammering each other. And I feel like some guiding principles in journalism would be good for our soul. And by that, I mean, when people are looking for stories, and I even get this, you're always looking for what's trending because that's what's going to get an algorithm and that's what's going to grow. But if we could ever figure out a way to crack a vision of saying, you know what, I am going to be committed to trying to not just share bad news. So wouldn't it be refreshing to see a program that said, hey, here's some of the good news going on in the world. Here's some of the things that are really troubling. Here's some of the stuff in between. And then even being disciplined enough, instead of, doing these ad hominem attacks or just attacking people's character, or even if we're trying to understand what's driving people's opinions, try to maybe validate some things about the other side, and then pointing out some of the concerns that we have. I mean, we're never going to be able to dialogue as a country if all we do is throw grenades at each other, because who wants to run out in front of a grenade? So the reason that you don't see good interaction is because we don't know how to communicate. And so we really need to learn just humility, communication, that we don't have to demonize everybody that doesn't agree with us, that we can find some things that might be nice to say about others. And then also, even when people hold the position, realizing that we all hold our beliefs because we've been shaped by our traumas, our coaches, the books we've read, the context we live in, the kind of church that we go to, all of this stuff shapes us. And so maybe we just start taking time to understand what is shaping people to have the kind of viewpoints that they do. So at least we're trying to understand one another, and then bring that understanding out on these kind of podcasts. Because right now, all we do is attack each other, cancel each other, and then we don't even get to the facts. We use ad hominem attacks. So it's honestly just a bunch of anxious energy that's out there that's feeding us. And we just need everybody to calm down and learn how to just, be grown up in the way that they communicate things.
Matt, is there a journalism department at Biola University?
There sure is, and we are accepting applications now for the fall. So if you want to come study in a world-class city like Los Angeles, how to do like really good journalism, like Bobby just alluded to, from a Christian worldview, Biola.edu, that's your spot.
Yep, very good. 888-564-6173. Stacy in Anaheim, welcome to Pastor's Perspective. How can we help you today?
Hi, thank you for all the good work you do. Just a quick two-part question. In the Bible, it says that Jesus' beard was plucked out during his passion, and I'm wondering if by chance that might have been the reason that Mary didn't recognize him in the garden.
What do you think, Matt? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And also, if people talk about maybe the Shroud of Turin is authentic, if his beard was plucked out, the man on the shroud also has a beard. So I'll hang up and listen.
Okay.
There's a lot there. Well, great question, Stacy. None of the four Gospels explicitly mention Jesus' beard being plucked out. Where that comes from, in Isaiah 50, so this is one of the what's called the suffering servant texts in Isaiah's prophecy there. There is a reference to the suffering servant of the Lord having in his suffering having his beard plucked out. So there's a historical tradition that infers from that. Well, then it must be that Jesus' beard was plucked out. But there's no explicit mention of that in the Gospels. Whereas I think it's interesting and noteworthy. The Gospel authors are really attentive to details, right? Because they're making historical documentation about this really happened, right? The Jesus of Nazareth really did these things. He really did suffer and die. And so especially Luke, for example, has so much historical detail. It's interesting there's no mention of this. So I don't think we know conclusively that Jesus' beard was plucked out. In fact, I think there's more likely reason to believe that language in Isaiah 50, it's prophetic. It's a prophetic genre there in the Old Testament, so it's not necessarily giving you a specific kind of detail. It's referring to the experience of this suffering servant. So I think that'd be one thing I would say. I think you asked a question about Mary Magdalene, or did that never come up?
Is that why Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus? Because
that's a fascinating part of it, right? Because she confuses him for the gardener. We know from the passage. What's interesting to me, I don't think it has anything to do with Jesus' facial hair. It's somehow in Jesus' glorified state, and he's the God-man now and always has been since his incarnation, but in his glorified resurrected body, he's able to somehow hide his glory from people. Because it's not just Mary in the garden. Think of the disciples on the road to Emmaus.
Right.
They're walking with Jesus. They get a whole Old Testament lecture that must have gone on for hours on the road, and Jesus is explaining, this prophecy here, that prophecy there, and they don't even know who they're talking to until he reveals himself to them. And it's actually when they're celebrating a meal and he breaks the bread and he reveals himself, and they're going, oh my goodness, it's been Jesus all the time. Yeah. So there's some way in which Jesus is able to hide kind of his glory, his resurrected glory in that moment. So I think that's actually more of the emphasis in that account, is not so much is his facial hair missing, it's Jesus does what he wants to do when he wants to do it. Mm-hmm. He's king of the universe, and he has conquered sin and death, and he's Lord.
Yep. Bobby Conway?
Yeah, that's a great answer, Matt. I think as it relates to even the beard, it wouldn't be, wrong to think that his beard got plucked, but not every hair was plucked.
Right.
And so,
that's right.
So if somebody came up and pulled, like if I had a beard and pulled some of the hair off my face, it would be a wooden, ultra literal reading to think, well, he was clean shaved after that. Well, I don't think that's the way to understand that, right? I mean, I think that they weren't interested in pulling every hair out of the beard. It just, he was going through a lot, so they probably yanked some of his hair off his beard and yanked some of the hair off of his head. I mean, there was a lot going on in that beating, but the Shroud of Turin is certainly something that excites me personally. I really like some of the evidence that we have and what that entails. And the more I think about it, and the more I listen to on it, the more cool I think it is that we have this ancient artifact.
Stacy, hope that answers your questions.
It does. Thank you very much. God bless you.
You too.
Yeah,
thanks for calling us at 888-564-6173. Nicole in Irvine, listening on FM 107.9 K-Wave. Hello. How can we help you?
Hi. So I had a two-part question. One is my daughter is 5 years old, and her classmate has two moms. So my daughter showed confusion of oh, you can marry a woman, or you can marry a girl is what she said. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted the proper way to explain to her that that's not what we believe as a Christian. Mm-hmm. And then the second part is she's very fascinated with heaven, which I love, and talks about, how beautiful it will be and stuff like that. And I've explained to her, if you know Jesus and, we're going to heaven. And she asked me the other day, well, what do you do if you don't know Jesus? And I kind of froze because I think it's too young to obviously explain hell. But what would I say to her on that?
Is 5 years old too soon to talk about the weeping and gnashing of teeth, Bobby Conway?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is tough. I think back to when my kids were younger. I don't think I avoided that. But at the same token, I can understand, there's probably a way to explain it. Me personally, I take that language is metaphorical, like flames, a literal place, but just metaphorical. And so you can focus on being with God or without God. And so, we have this wonderful opportunity as believers to spend forever with God, and that relationship can start right now. And sadly, some people aren't interested in God. They don't believe in him. And, God doesn't force his will upon them, but they choose to reject him. And as a result, they don't get to be with him. And there's a place that they call hell. And the reason it's called hell is because if you think about it, if God's the one who made us and he created us, I mean, that's just a hellish existence to miss that beautiful truth that we could have been in heaven. I think something like that, I'll throw that back to Matt if he wants to add on and take on the easy question of what to say to your 5-year-old about the two moms.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Bob. We're a great team here. I want to also just say to Nicole, God bless you, Nicole, as a mom, that this is what's on your heart. That's awesome. I mean, and what an opportunity, what a privilege God has given you to raise up this daughter. And that God's put her in your home. He could have put her in any other family, but he chose to put her in your family. And so she gets the blessing of hearing from a mom who wants her to know Jesus. And I would just say, I think actually for all of us, it's a really good exercise to know, if I had to explain the gospel to a 5-year-old, could I? Because here's the good news, is the gospel is simple enough that it can be explained. There are implications and there are things about what it's going to mean like to be with Jesus in eternity. My own mind can't fully comprehend all of that. I mean, no human mind can until we see him face to face. But there is something true to the fact that the gospel in its simplicity, right, that Jesus came and lived a perfect life. He died the death that I deserved so that I wouldn't have to suffer. He took my punishment. And he was raised from the dead, and he's king over all, and he loves me, and he wants to be with me, and he calls me into his life. There are ways you can put that, but the gospel in its simplicity, well, I guess what I would say is you can't really explain the good news if you don't also know the bad news. And I do think you can explain the bad news in a way that a 5-year-old can understand it. I don't think it's wise to try to scare kids into Christianity. Like we want them to follow Christ out of hearts of faith and love. But you do. I think it is appropriate to say, hey, as Bobby said, what is Jesus saving us from? He's saving us from an eternity apart from him. He's saving us from the punishment that we deserve. Because you know what? We all, mommies and daddies and little girls, we've all disobeyed God, and we deserve his punishment. But Jesus saves us from that. I think you can do that, Nicole, and God's given you the resources. It's clear you love your daughter and you love the Lord, and he's with you in those conversations. Mm-hmm. I would just say, lastly, on the friend with 2 moms, I wanted to maybe just suggest one resource that would be helpful. It's a newer book called What Do I Say When? By Andrew and Christian Walker. This is a husband and wife. Andrew's a prominent theologian and ethics professor and deals a lot with these issues of sexuality and as a dad and himself. So really helpful book. And some of the book deals with exactly these questions, like how do I talk about, I mean, even on this show today, we've been talking about some really complicated things. Well, how do I have that conversation with my young child? Because it's different at different stages of life. But I think what Christian parents are finding is we can't just stick our heads in the sand, and we've got to lean in. And these conversations are probably happening earlier than we think. Mm-hmm. If we're not having them, the culture is going to have them for us, and you don't want that. So I think most parents, when they say, is it too early for me to have a conversation about this? No, probably not. And so we need God's word, and I would just say, and you need other Christians in your life, whether those are people who are maybe a little further along, but mentors in your local church even, who can say, here's kind of how we're navigating it, because we benefit from that wisdom from others.
So this book, again, that Matt is talking about, it's by Andrew and Christian Walker. It's called What Do I Say When? I think that's the right way to say the title. What do I say when? And then the subtitle, A Parent's Guide to Navigating Cultural Chaos for Children and Teens. Topics like abortion, sexuality, transgenderism, political engagement, and more. Each chapter contains age-appropriate prompts for parents of children at different stages of development and maturity. So, yeah, you might want to check that out. Bobby?
Yeah, that's that question right there. I do think Matt's right. We have to start when they're young. There's too much exposure that kids will have, and regardless of how much we try to protect them. And I think in some ways we overprotect our kids. It's like, here's your helmet while you go into the shower. I think of the way, I grew up and roaming on my bike and exploring. There was so much that came with that. And yeah, I bumped into some things that were unhealthy. At the same token, I would have rather had those freedoms and to bump into some things if I could just have open and honest conversations about mom and dad as I do that, than to be just quarantined throughout my whole upraising. So I do think just honesty. And if I was talking to a 5-year-old, I would say something, if I was asked that question, like this. Well, the Bible that we believe in, and it's not just the Bible, throughout all history and cultures, marriage has been between a man and a woman. But in the last several years, our government made a law that allowed for same-sex people to be married. And that's what's happening in our culture. And we can love them, and we don't have to react in a weird way. And we can respect people and their differences. But as Christians, we we want to make sure that you know that we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that is God's plan for the family. But sometimes governments might, not always follow that plan. So I would want to say you're going to see a lot of this in our culture today, and you're going to see things like people saying that they're, you're going to guys becoming girls, girls becoming guys, and that's just confusion. And that confusion comes when we get away from God's word. But the key is that we want to believe God's word. But I just want to make you aware that this kind of stuff is out there, but it doesn't mean that just because you see this stuff that we have to adopt those values. Our responsibility is to stay true to the Bible. And so you don't need to go and say anything to your friend, or you can be respectful. You can realize that, that I'm sure that he's got two loving moms in this situation, but God's ideal plan is a husband and a wife.
Nicole, thanks for calling in with your question today on Pastor's Perspective. And again, that book that we mentioned is called What Do I Say When? By Andrew and Christian Walker. And here's another book recommendation. A journalist called and said, in my opinion, everyone should read The Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. So that might be a start there, too. 888-564-6173. Here's Hope in Canyon Lake. Welcome to the program, Hope.
Hi. Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking my call. I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing up this LGBTQ lifestyle stuff. My son is gay. He's married. I love his partner. And as a Christian, my job is to love them, hate the sin, love the person. And I've had a lot of family members that have just dissed them or off them and not allowed them to come around. And it breaks my heart because they were always very close. But I appreciate that you're bringing this up because I really think we're missing an opportunity to maybe share the gospel. I mean, the other day I was able to pray with my son and he called me back and said, thank you. He was brought up as a Christian. He went to Calvary all of his life. He Costa Mesa. He went to school there. So thank you.
Well, thank you for calling with that. Matt, any thoughts on that?
I just, a lot of these conversations, I just think of Paul's letter to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians, right? When he talks about like, this is basically who you were. And he recounts all these, just the sin, frankly, and the brokenness that had marked their lives before they knew Jesus. And but you were washed. You were cleansed. And then it's this just the constant hope that we hold as followers of Christ, that no one is beyond his power. No one's beyond the transformative power of his grace to sanctify them, to transform them from the inside out. And so hope, that's certainly, I know all of us in this room would be praying that for your son, that God's mighty hand would reach him, and that God would even use you and your love for your son to be an instrument of his grace and his salvation.
Yeah, Bobby?
Thank you.
It's interesting when this subject comes up, because I do feel like this is a hard issue for people. I mean, I think of these two young ladies that I know, and I see them all the time at Starbucks, and they live together, and they're just beautiful people. I mean, I really love these two girls. And when I watch them, you can tell they love each other and they care about each other. And, when you observe that, it can create, and so I can have this sense of, this is where the scripture's at, and this is where my feelings are at. And my heart can even go out big time in that way. But then I have to just remember in those moments that, well, my heart can go out in a lot of ways to a lot of things, and I just make sure I trust what God's plan is. And if I am communicating, I just say just that. And I have said this to one of them. We were talking, and I said, as a Christian, I have a conscience, and I just I'm just trying to be obedient to what I see and to trust that God's design in all this is what's best. But that doesn't mean that my heart can't recognize how hard that would be to have a same-sex attraction and hear from a Christian, well, you can't do that. I recognize the cost of what that would feel like to follow Jesus. But I also just want you to know that as a Christian, like, I would hate for you to think that I can't love you and appreciate you as a human being. It makes me sad because in our culture today, we often make people feel like they have to give something up in order to show love. And I think if I could just hold on and be faithful to my conscience and also show you love, and you could genuinely understand it's nothing personal. It's just about trying to be faithful. That would mean a lot. And boy, we can really just talk openly, and she's a special person, and so is the girl that she's dating. And so all that to say, just because you see two people in love, I mean, you could see a polygamous marriage where people are just all in love with that. And, so there's just got to be some boundaries somewhere. And as Christians, we're going to have lots of temptations to feel otherwise, and we have to be faithful.
Yeah. Matt, about 90 seconds.
Well, we've talked a lot today about just kind of the trauma and the wreckage that what we might call the sexual revolution has brought in our culture. I just think what a recurring theme in a lot of the comments that we've heard. And I think a lot of us hope and pray that our churches would be almost like hospitals where as we're seeing that carnage played out in real time, like in our communities and our families, like just devastating. Like, what if our churches became like hospitals where people who've walked through that come and they find the liberating power of the gospel to set them free? And rather than us saying, no, stay away, they hear, hey, this message is for anybody who will repent and believe. So you're welcome here. We want this gospel's for you. I think there's real opportunity here for our churches to step in and speak boldly the truth, but to do so with arms wide open, saying, and that means anybody can get in on this grace thing. It's for all of us.
Yep. Yeah. Hope, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. I don't think we have enough time to take another question. Thank you all for calling in today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Sorry that we couldn't get to all of the calls, but we'll be back tomorrow between 3 and 4, so you can try calling then. For author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway and Matt Hall from Biola University, thank you so much for listening today. You can find out more about Bobby on his church's website, imagechurch.live. Plus, he's got a couple of YouTube channels, including a new one called The Graphite Apologist. How's that one going, Bobby?
Well, it's only a week old, but, I just did a piece on Francis Schaeffer, and so I got some different pieces where I'll be releasing. So people go subscribe and watch me do some hyperrealism drawings and narrate it in 60 seconds, something that took 20 hours, and teach apologetics through art.
Very cool. And I know next week you're releasing the one on the Pope while the conclave is going on. Yep, that'll be interesting. So again, go subscribe to The Graphite Apologist with Bobby Conway. And we'll be back tomorrow. Matt Hall, thanks for coming in today. Good having you here.
Thanks so much for
Were the questions me. Okay? They weren't.
This is a highlight of my week. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Good to meet you, Matt.
God bless you guys. And you can find out more about Matt and Biola University by going to biola.edu. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you next time on Pastor's Perspective.